Today's webinar is on FrameReady and QuickBooks, and we have a special presenter with us, Diane Simonson. Okay, and I'm going to go right into FrameReady, and we'll start there. And I just want to show a couple of areas in FrameReady where you are going to see the QuickBooks. So if you are using QuickBooks, then up in the top right-hand corner under the Setup Data, or if you're not using QuickBooks, and then under the Fiscal tab, this is where you will see the QuickBooks button on your screen in FrameReady. Now, if you are not using FrameReady and you want to turn it off, then you're going to click on that button, and this is where you would turn it on or off. Now, if it is on, what I want to show you is where you're going to see those fields in FrameReady. And the first place I want to take you to is the contacts file. And in the contacts file, clicking on the icon, you will see up in the top right-hand corner that there is a QuickBooks ID number. So there's an ID number for FrameReady, and then there's also an ID number for the person in QuickBooks when they're in there. The other place that you can see information is in the products file. Now, if we go to the products file, you'll see a large green bar, and this is related strictly to QuickBooks. This is the category for FrameReady, and this is the one for QuickBooks called the QuickBooks Item. You will also see that in the Find view, and this will not be turned off when you turn it off, that there is a search as well for the QuickBooks item in here in the Find screen. The other location is in the Invoice screen. And if we go to the Invoice screen, you'll see that if you have QuickBooks turned on, there will be buttons or fields down at the bottom of the screen, all related to QuickBooks, but also in the line item section of the invoice, there are buttons as well. And if there isn't a category associated with it, it's going to be gray. And once you've clicked on it, again, that familiar green bar will allow you to select the category that you need. And once you've selected a category, it turns green. Again, in this screen, when you click on the Find button in FrameReady, it will give you the ability to search for those fields that you saw at the bottom, but also for the QuickBooks ID over here on the center of the screen. So you have search capability for the items that are in QuickBooks, along with the fields that are going to identify that information. The other location that you should be aware of is in the Work Order Options section. And when you click on that and go down to More Options, there's a tab in here for QuickBooks that is going to allow you to pre-select the QuickBook categories that are going to be used so that when you post a work order to an invoice, it's going to use those categories that you want automatically so that you don't have to go into each one and set them up individually on the invoice. So this will do it for you ahead of time. So that was another important thing for you to know. And also for you to know that FrameReady it's going to be a push, taking the information from FrameReady, moving it over into QuickBooks. You cannot move the information from QuickBooks back into FrameReady. So if you've made a payment in FrameReady, you're going to push it into QuickBooks. You can't go into QuickBooks, make a payment in QuickBooks, and expect to push it back into FrameReady. So it's a one-way road. So I think that's all the information that I had just to get us started. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go directly to the poll that we usually run. And I believe, Chrissy, you have a question already for us as well.
And it is, how do you handle your accounting? Select one or more of the following. Use accounting software. Enter each invoice into accounting software. Batch your daily invoices into one invoice or accounting program. Have an accountant do it, or do not use accounting software at all.
There we go. And Chrissy, I received a question from someone ahead of time. And if that's all right, is that all right if I ask that right now? And then
yeah, for sure. Thank you.
And then I can answer that. And the question is, if a customer information, address, or name is updated in FrameReady, will it be updated in QuickBooks when it is pushed from FrameReady into QuickBooks? So Diana, can you answer that question for us?
It is updated in the QuickBooks, as long as you're pushing it from the contact file, there is a place in the contact file when you update the address where you can then send that information to QuickBooks, and that's the best place to update that information. You don't want to really rely on doing it from the invoice updating portion of it. The invoice update is meant more for invoice information.
Great. Thank you. That really helps. Oh, thank you, Chrissy. And there's the information on our poll.
Yep.
Good information to see. Wonderful.
You guys should be able to see the FrameReady system on my screen now. I'm going to start from where Carol left off and just briefly went into where you want to go into the setup data. And I have set my system back to where we're kind of starting from scratch, although I do still have the tax rate in here. And the taxes can be a little bit tricky because you have to have them integrated exactly with QuickBooks. And with the QuickBooks Online, which I have a sample of here, for those of you who have not ever seen the interface, this is what it looks like for the, what we're looking at right here is actually a customer's Tasmia test last name. It's her history of payments and invoices that I was testing this afternoon. You want to make sure you have your QuickBooks completely set up before you start the FrameReady integration, particularly with the tax portion of it. Down here is where you can start setting up your taxes. You want to make sure that all the taxes, all the tax rates that you are going to be dealing with are established in QuickBooks, because when you set up the FrameReady system, you do need to pull that information in. And I'm going to show you how to do that. First of all, on my system, it has this little white box, and if that has a 0, you want to make sure it has at least a 1, and also make sure that your cursor is no longer in that box when you press this button. So make sure that 1 is an established value in that field for your QuickBooks license. And so once you come into here, as Carol showed, you would probably look at it as this, and when you click the on button, you now have an option to connect to QuickBooks. So this option makes sure that you're on the online version. You want it to have the globe there, and you would just press the connect to QuickBooks. And this on a Mac, it's a little different on PCs, but this is a Mac, and the online integration is cross-platform. I'm going into my Sandbox account here, and once you log in on a Mac, so if you have more than one company, you have to select your company. Otherwise, it just skips over that part, and it will show you this end page. Now, if you're on Windows, it's going to open an external browser. It will open in your web browser, and you will have to copy this value after you've gotten to this page. And so that's why we have it in an easy to copy spot there. It's in a field. But if you're on a Mac, all you have to do is just press complete. If you're on Windows, you would go under scripts and choose the QB Online Authentication Manual Finish for Windows users, and it shows you a pop-up, and you can paste that value in. So a little bit different there for Windows versus Mac, but it does work on both, and you only have to go through this process when you first set up the system. You don't have to go through it every time, because it does store enough information to connect on its own after that. So once you connect, you want to import all of your customers that you have in QuickBooks already, if you have any. And if you do, if you have matches, it will try to match them up by name and by company name. And if this link is blue, you can click on it to make it green to indicate that that is the same person, so that this person is the same person that is already in your FrameReady system. So if you're integrating, you know, you'll want to go through your customer list here and make sure that everybody's in there. And you can see Test Mia is someone that I pushed through from the beginning with the QuickBooks system from FrameReady to QuickBooks. The customers do go both ways, but you only want to use this when you're first setting it up. Generally, you want to always put your customers in FrameReady, and they will be automatically pushed to QuickBooks when you send their first invoice. Same with the accounts. You want to bring your accounts in. Now, there is an option to choose a refund account for refunds. We're not going to get into that today. That's a little bit beyond scope because we have a lot to cover here. But there is an option for that. Items are your products, and that's something I want to go over as well with the products, because it can seem like a lot of work to have all of your products in QuickBooks, and you really don't have to have all of your products in QuickBooks. If we go over here back into the QuickBooks interface, it depends on how you want to use QuickBooks, but you could just set up a couple of products to represent really all that really matters is that it's going to be taxed the same way as your products in FrameReady. As long as the tax representation is there, then that's really all that matters in terms of being able to use the two together. So you could make this really vague. You could make this say products. The really thing that matters with this is that you do set it up as a product and not a sub-product. You don't want to use sub-products, even though it might seem like a sub-product. You want it to be in QuickBooks, the category of an actual product. And I'll explain a little bit more why that is once we move along. But that's where you set that up. Like I said, what really matters is this tax and whether that is an appropriate tax for the item that you're pushing from FrameReady. Those have to match. Otherwise, you get a business validation error. So you pull in your items, and all this gets filled out automatically, as you saw. Then with tax codes, you also have to pull in your tax codes and your tax rates. They have them as two different categories. And you do have to select two tax code records as your corresponding tax code records. And so here, from my experimentation of what QuickBooks wants when I'm set up as a California business, I know that this is one of them. And one way you can tell is that you always want to choose a tax code that corresponds to a tax rate. So this has to be filled in on the selection. You'll notice that some of these, this one doesn't have a tax rate. So you know automatically that's not one that you want to choose. Now, what that means in QuickBooks and why they send that over, I am not a tax expert when it comes to that, and I don't know why QuickBooks does things the way they do, but I know how to set it up so that it works. So here I would choose, let's see, that says it's for number 12. Let me just check, because here's where in the tax rates you can actually see the rate. And I know the important one for California is 6.25%, and that's the ID of 10. And so in here, I want to make sure I'm choosing the ID of 10, and I'm going to give that my number one spot. So I have at least one corresponding tax set up, and I know that even though there's more than one tax, my goods and services only need to pay this tax. So that's the only one I'm going to do. And I pull in my payment methods. This is also a very important point. Right now, we only have 3 payment methods set up in QuickBooks. We have check, spelled C-H-E-C-K. We have credit card, and we have, I think cash is in, yeah, cash for the first one. So that's an important part too, and I will explain how that integrates once we actually get into where we push the invoice. Now here, notice that I have the 6.25% tax. I did enter that manually, and I entered that one too at first, but it seems that products don't need both. They only need the 6.25. So I chose tax 1 and tax 2. That is right here. That's the tax 1. And if you had a second tax that you knew was going to be added, you could choose another record for the tax 2. You only want to have one selected for each. And right now, FrameReady does only support 2 simultaneous taxes. So let's hope that we don't have to have too many taxes. Once, and just for the record, I haven't run into a single customer yet who has needed 3. So now with the actual pushing, I just want to show you first where in invoice detail, or rather contacts. This is the invoice details tab of contacts, and you can see the QuickBooks ID down here too. And you can also see how many times that record has been updated. So if I changed my address, oops, Tesmia, sorry. If I changed my address here, I can push it to QuickBooks again, and that number is going to change. That indicates that the record has been updated 1 time. This is a count of how many times the record has been updated. Push totals would be +1. So I've pushed it twice. It says 1 here because I've updated it once. If there's no record and no date, then that record has not ever been pushed to QuickBooks. So in the QuickBooks interface, we can see our customers here. And I had been looking at Miss Tess' last name before, and we can see now that her PO box is 214. And just to see it change, let's say, oh, it was supposed to be 241, not 214. We just accidentally switched those around. So now it says it's been updated twice. You do have to reload. It's not going to automatically reload for you if you want to just make sure something's gone over. So here we see it's been changed to 241. So that's the best, most foolproof way to push a customer record update is when you change it here, just pop over to the invoices tab and push the record there, and that will keep them up to date. We're watching this. I would wonder to myself, oh, am I going to have to enter all my customers in the customer database or the table now before I even make an invoice for them? And the answer to that is no. If you don't have a customer in that table, when you make their invoice and push their first invoice, it will create that automatically.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, Chrissy, you're up.
What do you think are the benefits of interfacing with QuickBooks? Easy to use, saves time, no more double entry, reduces user error, and all of the above.
Oh, yeah.
We do have a comment, and she's saying, when I sell products and it's put on an invoice in FrameReady and paid for, when I push to QuickBooks when I push to show in QuickBooks, it shows as product category.
Yeah, you want to make sure that it's not a product category that you're selecting for this. If you select a product category here, it's not going to be happy. In my experience, that's a way to get errors. So you want to make sure that the selections that you're choosing for your products are all actual products and not just product categories. But like I said, you can make those product descriptions very vague. You categorize your products here ahead of time, then you don't have to worry about them on the invoice. So there's a couple of ways to do that. You could do it with the work orders, you could do it with the products. So yeah.
Yeah, and you would have to do it for both of those, the work orders and the products, if you're selling retail products.
Do we have another question?
I do have one more question. It's asking, can contacts be automatically pushed to QuickBooks?
As a found set, you can, let's see, do we have a push all? I know we've done it before. Well, there's a find not pushed yet. And if you choose this, you get all the people that have not been pushed yet, and you can just flip through and push them. I know we have built looping before, but the problem with that is that if there's a problem with one of them, then you know it will hold up the process. And so really it's best to just push them as they come. And I think there's tools in QuickBooks too that accept imports. And so that's another way to just quickly get your customers in there, are the imports.
And the other option too, Diana, is that if it's on an invoice, if that's a new customer and they're on the invoice, then they will automatically be pushed into QuickBooks when you push the invoice, correct?
That's right. And that's what I want to demo next, actually.
Okay, great.
I want to demo creating a new invoice with a new customer from scratch. So can everybody still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to make a new invoice here. And I'm going to make it for a new customer. New customer. And it's not going to find my new customer because they're new. And so it asks me if I want to create them. And maybe I'm really busy and I just say done. And you can do that. That's all it needs. You can put anything in there that you want, really. Now, I know FrameReady does like me to specify a sales rep, and so I go ahead and do that. Here, I know that there's a way to search on items. I prefer to just type in freehand, I test product. And let's say it's a pretty big sale, $500. And I'm just going to start with that for now. You could, as you know, you can mark it tax exempt. You can adjust taxes if you have more than one tax, if you need to, if that's not already linked to the product, which you can link it to the product as well. So once I do that, I want to make sure that all my squares here are green. They have to be green. And so if there's any gray squares, I make sure that I select the appropriate product before I try to push it. So we've got a new customer here who's buying one $500 product, and we're going to push that to QuickBooks and see what that looks like. And it says it returned a successful result. And if we go into invoices now, we have a new invoice. So here we can see if we choose to edit the invoice. Let's see, this is QuickBooks. It should, there we go. It was a little sluggish. Let's see if it So it shows my $500 test product, and it still has $500 due. Well, more than that because of the tax. And so if we go back now, and that customer is coming back into the store to make a payment, they've reserved it. Let's say they've reserved it, and they're coming back, and now they've made a partial payment, and they see something else that they want. And so now you can actually add new line items to this. Yeah, so let's say they decided they saw something else in your store they really liked, just something maybe a little smaller. And so they have added that to their order, and now they're starting to pay for things too. Now here's where that payment type really matters. If you choose anything that is not on your list in payment types that you've imported, it's not going to work. It's going to give you an error. Check was on our list, but not spelled CHQ. It was spelled CHECK. And so you would want to edit this list to make sure that the values that you're choosing are going to match the initial payment methods that you brought in. Right now, all we've got here is cash that matches. So that's what I'm going to choose. And I'm going to make a partial payment. I'm going to say that he came with $200. So now when I go back to done for this, and I can see I have a gray square, so I need to take care of that gray square. I'm going to just choose the same one. And I have a payment down here. I don't need to worry about there being any gray squares on that. There never will be. But once you push the payment, you get a green square here, and that green square on the payments represents payments that have been pushed. So it's a little bit different what the green squares stand for depending on where they are. So when we go back to QuickBooks and look at this invoice for the new customer, now we can see that their amount has gone up. And when I click to edit, we can see our $25 line item has been added, and we can see that our balance due is now $357.81 because they've given us $200. So it's keeping up quite nicely, even though that invoice has now been pushed a total of 2 times because we added the line item and the payment simultaneously, but you can of course add one or the other. Doesn't matter. So that's how that works in terms of updating. It updates quite nicely, and it added your new customer too, and not just on the invoice. If you go to the customers section, you can see you have this new customer, and it shows their payments and their invoices. And as you add more invoices, if you made a second invoice for them and chose them, then it would also add to their history that way. So just new product here. Oh, I forgot. Actually, it's nice that FrameReady reminds me. Would you like to enter customer information before proceeding? Yes. So Mr. New Customer. And now when I push this one, oops, I almost forgot my green square. So now if we look back in QuickBooks to see, QuickBooks now shows me that he's got 2 invoices with a total outstanding balance of $410.94. So how are we for questions now?
I think
We actually do have a couple questions.
Okay.
So the first question, I did reply back to the fella, and he was asking, will all these options work on desktop and online? I did let him know that we aren't supporting the desktop version of QuickBooks.
We're not actively supporting the plugin anymore because the move is to go on.
And the QuickBooks Online is very secure.
Yes, yes, it is. You know, the QuickBooks people, they are, you know, they have people looking out actively to make sure that you know, the wrong people aren't accessing it. And you've got double authentication that you can set up. I think it might even be required now with the QuickBooks accounts. I only have a Sandbox account for testing. So I don't have double authentication on my Sandbox account because there's nothing real in there. But you know, if it is still optional on the live accounts, I encourage you to use double authentication. I encourage you to use it every place it's offered for everything that you're using.
Super. Chrissy, is there another question?
Yep, I was about to ask, would the gray square area be where I specify if it's framing sales versus retail product sales on the green line?
You could, as long as that's how you had it set up in QuickBooks. You would want to make that distinction in QuickBooks. Basically, whatever you put in this product list is what's going to come up as options, the products and services. And as you can see, it does, you know, even in their default data set, they have, you know, services as an option here. But you can set up the products to be inventory or non-inventory, service or bundle. I don't use bundle for pushing stuff to QuickBooks. I mean, you can bundle stuff, that's fine. But as far as selecting something to go in that green square, do not use something that you've categorized as a bundle. You need it to be an inventory, non-inventory, or service item. So, and not a sub-product service either. You want it just to be a regular flat item.
And the other thing, I guess the question would be back to the person who's asking that question, is because if it's for picture framing on the work order setup in FrameReady, under the QuickBooks tab, you can set it up to say that the work order is going to go under framing. The retail products are set up in the products file, and there's a green bar there, so you can set that up before you ever get to the invoice. So it's automatically going to put in the QuickBooks category for you as soon as you enter that product onto the invoice. Now, if you decide that you want to, I don't know if you're asking if you want to change that product later on to say, instead of going into services, it should have gone into hours, you know, or something else, or art, it should have gone into something else. I guess that's an option that you could possibly do when you go to the invoice, if you want to change it on the invoice. And I guess that's, I think that's what you're asking. But it's much better if you set it up ahead of time here.
Yeah.
Or showing you.
Yeah, you can choose anything you want here. If it's not coming up as the right item automatically, you can select whatever you want. As long as the tax is in line, like I said, the way you have the tax set up in FrameReady has to be the same as what you've selected here in terms of taxability, taxable or non-taxable. Also too, when I set up my sample here, it bugged me to put in a quantity. So I did. Whether or not you keep track of, you know, your inventory in FrameReady or in QuickBooks or both, it's up to you. I just put that in there because it was saying, you know, it was giving me a little bit of a hard time, QuickBooks was, on not having anything in there. Now, notice that I don't have a price. I put as little information in here as possible because I want to use, you know, I want to have as much information as I can coming from FrameReady without being tied to having everything match. So that's why I set it up that way and put in as little as I possibly could get away with.
Great.
I have another question for you. So for QuickBooks, are we able to set up a category called e-transfer, or should we call it cash under invoice for payment?
I'm pretty sure that QuickBooks has a lot. I'm looking to see like where are my it's funny because I know it pulls it in, but where the when in doubt, go under the little gear and look for all lists. That's what I do to try to, here it is, payment method. Most of the time when I can't find something, that's where I can find it. So here you can choose new and name it whatever you want. So you could have e-payments. You could designate that it's a credit card. Now let's set up a credit card because I think that's where their option.
That's okay. At least so it would be easy to add the e-transfer in there as
Sure.
a payment type, and then just add it to the list of tender in the invoice screen, and then it's linked up.
That's
I
right.
do have one more question that just came in. Do we have time for it?
Sure.
Awesome. Hi, how are daily credit card batch sales credited to the bank account?
That is something that you would set up in here under banking, I believe. There's ways to set that up though in here in terms of settling your accounts. It gives you some of the options here. You can see how it works connecting a bank or credit card and all kinds of reports you can generate in QuickBooks.
And thank you so much, Diana, for joining us today and being our guest speaker.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Great. And we'll see everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.